first day of our videos. Now, this is the old white church. This is where we used to meet. We started meeting here at Faith Missionary Church in 1902. We met here until 1986. And so for 84 years, this was our church. One of the things that I always think about when I look at this church, every time I drive by it, I think about the foundation that it has. It looks almost brand new. And I always think about all the different things that have happened in this building, all the different lives that have been changed, all of the heartache and the pain that has been worked through in this building, all the times of celebration. But when I look at that foundation, I see something sturdy and strong and still going. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Hello. And so we're back from our field trip that we took just a few blocks away over to the little white church, and now we're back over here at the new church. But you know, every time I drive by that old white church, I think about its foundation, right? That after all of these years, it's still standing strong, and I know that it's been through some wonderful times, but it's also been through some troublesome times, some hard times. And so I think about all the celebrations that have taken place on that foundation, and I also think about all of the heartache and pain that's been laid at the foot of the cross in that building as well. You know, that foundation has withstood storms, it's withstood floods, it has seen times of plenty, but also it has seen times of drought. And I think for us today, right, we can all use a reminder of the importance of a strong foundation, what that means for us today. And I know that right now we're reeling a little bit in some uncertain times. And as I've been making plans and trying to respond to the different demands that have come my way in the last few weeks, I have found comfort in what Scripture says about times like this. You know, I've been reading a few books and talking to some people, and all of those things have kind of helped shape this just real short message I want to share with you today as well. And I want you to know that even though we may feel worried about the future, we might feel a little bit nervous about what's next, that we can be encouraged today. The reality is that we follow a God who promises to never leave us or forsake us, right? And the truth is that the world has a way of coming at that exact promise, right? It has a way of coming at us with some strong winds, right? You know, this last week we ended up taking shelter. We had a tornado warning, and so the sirens are going off, and we head down to the basement for safety. But the truth is that all of us at one point or another, right, we have searched for protection from the storms of life. And I think about that. If only our storms were just limited to wind or to rain. But the truth is that the storms of life are much bigger. We're talking about hurts and struggles and financial ruin and disease and death, right? Does anybody know where to find shelter that is safe from those kinds of storms? Well, the Apostle Paul did. And I want to talk with you a little bit about it. The truth is that for him, man, if anybody had reason to be anxious, it was this guy. And so as we kind of roll back in time with him for a minute, you think about Paul and as he's writing these words, and he's now an older guy, and he's in a Roman prison, and he's probably about 60 years old, and he's been a Christian for maybe about 30 years now. And you think about those 30 years of ministry, and they have taken their toll. He's moving a little bit slower. His body doesn't work quite like it used to, and for good reason. I mean, you can blame it on the miles that he's traveled or the beatings that he's taken. And you know he received 39 lashes on 5 different occasions. You know, he was beaten three other times with rods. You know, he would certainly have been covered in scars, and he'd been left for dead more than once. He was imprisoned. He was deserted by friends and coworkers. He had endured shipwrecks and storms and even starvation. And I just imagine him sitting there just weary, right, and tired and sore. And on top of all that, he's in prison for sitting there waiting to be put on trial by a Roman emperor. And Nero, he was known for killing believers just to try to earn some popularity among his people. So things are kind of stacked up against Paul right now. And then on top of all of that, Paul is also carrying with him the burden or the weight of trying to help to lead and encourage all of these brand new churches. And of course, in the midst of these churches, there are members who are arguing with each other. There are preachers who are preaching out of pride and envy and who are self-centered and so much for just being a simple follower of Jesus, right? And so he's sitting there and his future just feels dark. But you wouldn't know it. You would have no idea, because the interesting thing is that if you read his words, you would think that he was writing from the comfort of his study as he's sipping some tea, sitting by the fire. But his letter to the Philippians, it never, ever expresses even one fear or one complaint, not one. He isn't angry with God, but instead he is giving God praise and thanks, and he's encouraging his friends to do the same. And so he writes in Philippians 4:4, he writes this. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I will say rejoice." And so Paul's prescription, right, for anxiety or worry or stress begins with a call to rejoice. And he's saying rejoice and then rejoice some more. And when you feel like you're done, let's rejoice again. But you're like, man, how can a person live this out? Rejoice always? I mean, it feels super impossible, to live out some sort of uninterrupted spirit of gladness. But here's the deal. That isn't what Paul is asking us to do. He's encouraging us to rejoice in the Lord. And so that verse is a call not to a feeling, but to a decision, right? To a choice, to a deeply rooted confidence that God exists, that he is in control, and that he is good. And Paul rooted himself in that belief. It became his unshakable foundation. A foundation that kept his house intact during the roughest storms of his life. And so he can be like, hey, let Nero get crazy. Let these preachers make it all about them. Let the beatings come. Let the storms blow. Paul's foundation of faith wasn't going to break apart because of those things. He had stabilized it, right, with an unshakable belief in the one who holds all things together. And so the question for us right now, this morning, this afternoon, whatever time you're watching this, is where do we find our foundation today? Right? Is it in our jobs or the positions that we hold? Is it in our bank account and how secure that we feel that we can pay our bills each and every day, and we have a 401k waiting for us when we retire in that RV down the road? Is it found in our health and knowing that maybe I exercised and ate well enough today to keep everything in good shape? Is it found in the successes of our kids, right? And how good they are at school or sports or music? I think that the reality is a lot of times our foundation is most often found in how we perceive our ability to keep control of what's going on around us, right? And that's what we try and do. We try to control everything. I mean, can we though? I mean that is definitely our frustration with today's circumstances, with what's going on around us. But can we actually live that way and truly live? I mean, will we ever be able to board a plane again and not think about getting sick? Will we have a moment again where we aren't judging all of the people around us who are coughing? Right? Will we have a moment again where we leave the house without a mask? And those are the ways that we try to deal with it, right? We face anxiety by trying to take control. But if only we could. And I don't want you to get me wrong. We need to be smart. We need to be responsible. And we should certainly be protecting ourselves and the ones we love, especially protecting the people around us who are at greater risk. And we should take proper precautions. But I'm just wanting you to know that the control is not what makes a strong foundation. Author Max Lucado, he says it this way. He says, yet certainty is a cruel imposter, right? A cruel imposter. That a person can somehow accumulate millions of dollars and still lose it in a recession. That a health fanatic can eat only nuts and veggies and still battle cancer. That a hermit can avoid all human contact and still struggle with insomnia, right? That we want certainty, but the only certainty is the lack of certainty, right? And that is why the most stressed out people are control freaks, because they fail at the quest that they most pursue, right? The more they try to control the world, the more they realize they cannot. And so life becomes a cycle of anxiety and failure and anxiety and failure, and we can't take control because control is not ours to take. And so I just want you to know that Scripture tells us the answer in all of this. And instead of trying to gain control, we need to give it away, right? You can't control the world, but you can entrust it to God. And that is why Paul is saying that's what he's saying when he says, rejoice in the Lord, right? That peace is within reach, not because, we don't have any problems, but because the presence of a sovereign Lord is there. And you might hear that word sovereign. What does that mean? Well, it means supreme and ultimate power. So the creator of all things, the God who knit you together, the God who breathed your life into existence and breathed the universe into existence, knows you. And he is the one who is in control. And you don't have to carry that weight with you anymore. And we can certainly rejoice in that right now. And I just want you to be encouraged by that together we can rejoice together in the midst of these crazy, uncertain times, because we have a God who is in control of all things. We don't have to carry that weight. We just need to be faithful with what he has given us. We need to take every opportunity we can to lift up and encourage and bring hope to the people around us, especially now. And so as we wrap up, I want to leave you with some questions, maybe some discussions that you can have with your friends or with your family or whoever you're sitting with as you watch this video. And so let me just give you a few. Number one, I want you to read Philippians 4 verses 4 through 8 together. And think about, just discuss, like what jumps out to you when you hear these verses. And then number two, what ways can you rejoice in the Lord in your own life each day? So just talk about some ways you can do that. And then number three, I want you to read Psalm 56 verse 3. And then Matthew chapter 6 verses 25 through 34. And then 1 Peter chapter 5 verses 6 through 8. And how do these verses help to bring you comfort? What do they say about comfort? And then number 4, I want you to read Habakkuk 3, verses 17 through 19. And also spend some time discussing how this section of Scripture is really similar to what Paul was saying to us in Philippians. And then number 5, I want you guys to talk about how you can come alongside of people and encourage someone this week and help them to know that they can rejoice in the Lord as well, even in times that are just uncertain and confusing, especially in those times. And so we are thankful. We are thankful for what God has given us, for what he is doing. We are praying for each and every one of you. We look forward to when we can spend time together again. And I just hope you have an amazing, blessed day together.